A quick note on the Hillary email situation that we covered at the beginning of the show. Troy in Washington State says, Norm, government email sucks anyway.
Right.
Well, he's got some facts to back it up. Norm, I totally agree. Hillary's email situation, not a scandal. Not a scandal. What should be a scandal is actually how crappy the government's email is. Remember during the alleged supposed IRS scandal, how they had reported, the IRS reported they had to delete older emails so that their inboxes didn't exceed the capacity. The IRS would have been better off with all the free storage offered by a Google account. Troy, thank you so very, very much. I appreciate that very sensible email to Norm at normangoldman.com. Let's talk to Mark in in Seattle. Hi, Mark in Seattle.
Hey, Norm, it's Mark Taylor-Canfield.
Hey, Mark, how you been?
Oh, well, I haven't talked to you in a while because I've been taking time off to write my novel, but good to hear Sanchez filling in today on the phone. That was cool to talk to him.
Well, there you go. I like Sanchez.
Yeah, I've known him for a while, and he's a good fan. But I've been covering some scandals here in Seattle, actually, over at Daily Coast and at the Capitol Hill Times about this major dislocation and displacement of the population. And just to give you a background on that, during Mayor Ed Murray's State of the City speech last month, he focused on two main themes, and that is economic inequality and racial inequality. And I know we've talked before about the Department of Justice review of the Seattle Police Department calling for reforms after they found a practice and policy of using excessive force and racial profiling. So now we have another scandal going on, and that is that we now have the unfortunate reputation of having the fastest increasing rents in the country and some of the most massive developments I've ever seen anywhere, Norm. It's incredible. So the result has been a loss of affordable housing and the closing of a lot of independent art and music venues in the city. And so in my latest editorial, I put the local politicians on notice and said, you know, the overdevelopment and the displacement of people of color, immigrants, folks living in poverty, and actually a lot of the middle class has become a major political issue in Seattle. And it is causing a backlash amongst a lot of voters to feel that Seattle's unique culture is being wiped out by these high-rolling real estate dealers and developers. So right now, there are a lot of people who are trying to overturn this situation, and there's a major city council election coming up, and it's pretty obvious to me that any candidate that takes on this issue will receive a lot of support because, unfortunately, Seattle has no rent control, and that's due to a statewide prohibition. So that has to be addressed at the state legislative level, where, unfortunately, one of the houses is currently a majority Republican by just a few members. But there are some folks in the city that are starting a political movement as a backlash. There are artists that are trying to buy their own galleries and co-ops doing crowdsourcing funding campaigns like GoFundMe and stuff. And there's a group in the Central District in Seattle, which has predominantly been a black area, where there's now...
In Detroit, a lot of very wealthy white investors are coming and buying up big chunks of Detroit very cheap. And, you know, they're speculating. In New York City, the rents and everything have skyrocketed. And now in Brooklyn, in large parts of Brooklyn, which had been very minority dominated for a long time, there's a lot of black flight now because a lot of wealthy white people are moving in, buying the houses, kicking out the black people and fixing them up and living their yuppie lives. It's happening all over the nation.
Yes, I've been hearing that from my friends in New York. Just the other day, someone from Brooklyn was telling me that. And I guess, you know, what I'm hoping to see is groups of people joining together and creating political PACs to try to, get some people elected to city councils and to the office of the mayor in these cities to try to at least ameliorate some of the displacement. I mean, nobody wants it to be, undeveloped, and nobody wants to live in a city where there's no construction jobs and nothing happening. But at a certain point, the development just gets out of control. And in Seattle, we have a perfect example of that, where there is no rent control, and people are just being evicted left and right because,
Mark, I got to
buy up your building.
Franklin Roosevelt
get together and buy their own buildings.
Well,
that's my thought.
That's the thing is people, look, people have got to take responsibility for their own lives, and they've got to be creative. and they've got to do what they can. But the truth of the matter is that a lot of politicians in a lot of cities all around this nation think it's a marvelous thing when a bunch of white money comes in and takes over these areas and, according to the white politicians, quote, spruces them up. Now, I'm on your side here, Mark, but I have to tell you, one of the things that forced me out of the city of New York, where I was born and raised, I couldn't stomach it anymore. The last mayor that was there when I was living there was a guy named Ed Koch, spelled the same way as the Koch brothers, Koch, but he pronounced it Koch. He had a policy, a thought-out, intentional policy to gentrify portions of the city that had been what he considered to be seedy. I didn't consider these areas to be seedy, but him with his whiteness said, we're going to gentrify these areas. Kicked out a lot of poor people, kicked out a lot of people of color, and I was so disgusted because a huge homeless population came from there, and I said, I'm out of here. I can't take you guys anymore. Mark, it's happening everywhere, and by the way, we were back in New York not that long ago for very sad occasions, as I've shared with you previously. But we went back into Brooklyn, and I got to tell you, there were portions of our tour through Brooklyn where I did not blink for minutes at a time because there were areas of Brooklyn that I knew to be very poor and very, very untended. All of a sudden, I'm looking around going, hey, wait a